Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world painted in pastel optimism, chrome appliances, lawn care rivalries, and casseroles containing things no human should ever combine. We're heading straight into the glossy, sun-bleached, anxiety-ridden paradise known as the 1950s American suburbs. A place where every house looked the same, every dad was allegedly fine, every mum was secretly exhausted, and every child was one sugar cube away from climbing the neighbour's roof. So before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And thank you for suggesting this topic, by the way. It was such a fun one to explore. Leave me a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow it's always midnight for someone folding laundry. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet in case a rogue mid-century Roomba, also known as a mouse, decides to wander by. Let's take a moment. Have you ever wondered what life in a 1950s suburb actually felt like? Did people really mow their lawns 3 times a week just to one-up Earl across the street? Did mothers genuinely enjoy Jell-O salads with suspended olives, or were they silently begging for help? How many cigarettes could one dad smoke before breakfast? And why did every living room look like it was designed by someone who feared colour but loved doilies? What was it really like to be a kid back then, running wild, unsupervised, and somehow still expected to be in bed by 8? Would you survive a day without the internet, DoorDash, or a thermostat that doesn't require summoning a repairman? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the American suburbs circa 1953. Your sheets are scratchy, your bedspread is aggressively floral, and someone downstairs is already banging pots around like they're starting a breakfast war. Good luck. You open your eyes to the sound of a radio clicking on, some cheerful announcer greeting America far too energetically for 6 a.m. The house smells like coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and every wall is buzzing faintly with the hum of newfangled appliances plotting to break in unison. For a moment you lie still, adjusting to the strange sensation of being in a house where every object seems to have its own opinion. The refrigerator hums a little too confidently in the kitchen. The toaster lets out an occasional metallic twitch, as if preparing for a nervous breakdown. Even the floorboards have something to say, usually good luck in a passive-aggressive creak that suggests they're tired of being walked on. The sun hasn't even committed to rising yet, but the house is already awake. That's the thing about 1950s suburbs. Everyone went to bed early, but nothing actually slept. Not the neighbours, who seem to start their day by moving furniture for fun. Not the dog 3 houses down who barks at oxygen. And definitely not the flock of early bird suburban dads who leave their driveways with identical briefcases and identical expressions of mild, coffee-dependent despair. You stretch under sheets that are crisp enough to exfoliate your elbows. The bedspread is aggressively floral, a pattern inspired by someone who definitely saw flowers once, but mostly remembered them as a personal attack. Everything in this room feels carefully curated to ensure a maximum level of visual stimulation and a minimum level of actual comfort. Your pillow is firm, but in the way that suggests it was stuffed by someone who hated pillows. Then comes the voice of Mom calling you from downstairs, not loudly, but with the uncanny tone of a woman who can and will come up here if you don't move immediately. You know she's already been up for an hour, ironing something or cleaning something or judging something. That's how 1950s houses worked. The women woke up before the men, before the kids, before the sun, and possibly before time itself, just to maintain the illusion that the house took care of itself. You swing your feet onto the cold hardwood floor, which for reasons unexplained by science is always icy regardless of season. A draft sneaks in under the window. The curtains flutter. You're reminded that insulation hasn't been invented yet, at least not in forms that actually function. Down the hallway you hear Dad shaving. The sound is rhythmic, almost calming, razor against skin, faucet running, Dad muttering about Eisenhower, taxes, or the neighbour's hydrangeas. He's preparing himself for another day at the office. That mythical place children of the era imagine as either a suit-and-tie gladiator arena or a giant building where men type and smoke until they retire. When you step into the hallway, the air smells faintly like floor wax, cigarette smoke, and optimism mixed with anxiety. Every house from this era somehow manages to smell like all three. You make your way toward the kitchen, guided by the aroma of percolating coffee, an aroma strong enough to make you believe you've lived an entire life already. But before you get there, you pass by the living room. Everything is perfectly arranged. Couch cushions plumped into ideal geometric shapes, magazines fanned out like decorative feathers, the television sitting proudly in its wooden cabinet like a sleepy mechanical oracle. You're not allowed to touch any of it because this room is for guests who may or may not exist. This is a recurring theme in the 1950s. Parts of the house designed more for imagined approval than physical use. Finally, you reach the kitchen. The linoleum floor is shining with a brightness that feels vaguely aggressive. The table is set. Dad's coffee sits beside the newspaper, which he reads as though it personally insulted him. Mum moves around the room with the grace of someone who has accepted her fate, but intends to do everything perfectly anyway. And as you sit down at the kitchen table, surrounded by gleaming appliances, humming walls, and the faint distant sound of a neighbour starting his second lawn-related task of the day, you realise something. The house doesn't actually wake up when you do. It's been awake all along, plotting, humming, judging, and carrying the weight of an era, determined to look perfect even when absolutely nothing is. You shuffle into the kitchen, where breakfast isn't complete without bacon, scrambled eggs, and at least one adult lighting up a cigarette like it's part of the food pyramid. The percolator gurgles ominously, threatening to overflow like it does every single day. The kitchen is already alive with heat, sound, and the faint smell of impending chaos. Bacon crackles aggressively in the pan, popping like it's trying to escape. Eggs bubble away in their skillet, forming shapes that could be interpreted as either breakfast or a psychological cry for help. Toast is burning, as it always is, because in the 1950s browned is a myth, and slightly charred is considered a culinary achievement. The table is set with cheerful optimism, bright placemats, cold butter that refuses to spread, orange juice poured into sweating glasses, and a sugar bowl that looks like it holds enough sweetness to power the classroom you'll be sitting in later. Mum is already moving between stove and counter with the speed and precision of someone who has accepted that her day will be long, but refuses to let it defeat her before 7 a.m. Dad sits at the head of the table, suit jacket draped over the chair, cigarette dangling from his lips as he reads the morning paper. Nothing pairs with bacon like mild existential dread, and he inhales both with equal commitment. The newspaper rustles dramatically each time he turns a page, like he's trying to scare the headlines into behaving. Occasionally he mutters something about taxes or the Russians or the price of gasoline, topics that blend together into a soundtrack of mid-century adulthood. Across the table, someone, possibly you, is handed a plate that is 60% eggs, 30% bacon, and 10% something unidentifiable, but almost certainly edible. The eggs are fluffy, the bacon is crispy, and the smell is strong enough to travel 3 blocks and make your neighbour Frank annoyed that he didn't think to fry bacon first. Mum finally sits down with her own plate, though she barely gets 2 bites in before leaping up to adjust something, turn down the bacon, turn up the toaster, rescue the percolator from another attempted explosion. She's wearing an apron patterned with cheerful flowers that contrast sharply with the look in her eyes, which says she's been awake since the Roosevelt administration. The radio on the counter plays softly, a cheerful, overly calm announcer insisting that today will be wonderful, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. He reports the news in a tone suggesting he personally approves of every global event, no matter how unsettling. Then, without warning, the station breaks into an upbeat jingle for dish soap that promises to fix your life if you just buy enough of it. Between bites of breakfast, you look around and notice how every object in the room seems designed for optimism: bright colours, rounded edges, smiling advertisements promising a future filled with convenience and joy. Never mind that half these appliances make noises like a dying walrus. It's the 1950s and hope is a mandatory ingredient in every kitchen. Dad finishes his first cigarette, stubs it out and immediately lights a second, partly because nicotine has been rebranded as a morning vitamin, and partly because parenting in this decade seems to rely solely on caffeine and willpower. He takes a long sip of coffee that is strong enough to melt steel, nods in approval, and goes back to reading about the economy. You finish your breakfast, feeling the pleasant heaviness of too many eggs settling into your stomach. Mom hands you your lunch bag, packed with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and a cookie that tastes faintly like the tin it lives in. She pats your shoulder, straightens your shirt, and gives you a smile that says, "Please don't make me come to the school today." As you step toward the door, Dad calls after you with the traditional suburban farewell. Be good. Not helpful guidance, but heartfelt in its vagueness. And as you walk out into the bright morning air full of bacon, sugar, and the faint aroma of second-hand smoke, you realize something. Breakfast in the 1950s isn't just a meal. It's an energy source, a ritual, a coping mechanism, a performance, a reminder that everyone is doing their best with whatever they've got, including percolators that absolutely refuse to behave. Dad appears in his crisp white shirt, tie already too tight, pretending he slept well even though he stayed up worrying about mortgage payments and whether the lawn looks communist. He stands there in the doorway for a moment, adjusting his tie with the solemnity of a man preparing to face both his boss and the terrifying blade on the neighbour's new rotary mower. His white shirt is starched so stiffly it could probably deflect bullets. His shoes shine so brightly you could use them to signal passing aircraft. And under it all, behind the carefully combed hair and the faint smell of aftershave that could stun a horse, is a man quietly trying to hold together an entire suburban universe. The briefcase sits on the counter beside him. Dark leather, slightly worn, heavier than it looks. It contains paperwork, pens, a pocket calendar, and the crushing psychological weight of providing for a mid-century family of 4 on a single income. Dad grabs it with the reverence of someone lifting a sacred relic. In many ways he is. This briefcase is both his sword and his shield, except instead of slaying dragons, he's battling memos, sales calls, and Harold from accounting. He pours himself another cup of coffee, the kind brewed strong enough to dissolve emotional turmoil. He takes a long sip and nods like a man who has accepted his fate. With that caffeine, he can endure anything. Traffic, meetings, small talk, capitalism itself. This is the breakfast of warriors. Mom hands him his neatly packed lunch, another wax paper wrapped sandwich, another apple, another day. He thanks her with a soft smile that never quite reaches his eyes. The smile of a man who appreciates the gesture, but knows he will still buy a donut from the office vending machine at 10 a.m. out of sheer existential necessity. He checks his watch. Dad always checks his watch. It's practically a ritual, performed every morning even though the time never seems to change. Late enough to worry him, early enough to pretend it's fine. As he puts on his jacket, he glances toward the living room window. The neighbour, Frank, is already outside, aggressively sweeping his porch. Dad narrows his eyes, sensing competition. Frank's lawn is slightly greener this week, and Dad takes that personally. Suburban masculinity, after all, is measured in grass height and the number of tools you own but never actually use. "Swell morning," Dad mutters, sounding unconvinced. It is objectively not swell. The weather is humid, the sky is grey, and the car muffler has been making a sound like a dying moose. But optimism is part of the uniform. He steps onto the driveway and takes a moment to inhale deeply, partly to appreciate the morning air, but mostly to build up the emotional fortitude required to survive another day under fluorescent office lighting. He pats the hood of the family sedan, whispering a desperate plea for it to start without complaint. Dad does not have the funds, patience, or spiritual resilience for another visit to the mechanic. You trail behind him, watching as he loads himself into the driver's seat with the weary grace of a man who understands his role in the great suburban performance. He belongs to a generation that believes feelings are best expressed through lawn care and occasional grunts. Vulnerability is something reserved exclusively for moments when the bills arrive or when the toaster breaks again. Before he leaves, he rolls down the window and gives the family his trademark farewell nod, a subtle, stoic gesture that says, "I love you, I will return, and may God help me if the boss asks me to stay late again." The engine coughs, rumbles, then finally settles into a shaky idle. Dad pulls away from the house and heads toward the horizon, where office buildings rise like solemn monuments to paperwork and responsibility. And as you watch him go, you realize something about your Suburban Atlas. He's not just carrying his briefcase. He's carrying the house, the family, the expectations, the fears, the endless need to look put together, even when he feels anything but. Dad drives off each morning holding up a world that isn't always light, but he carries it anyway. Tie too tight, coffee too strong, and heart fuller than he ever lets on. You step into a bathroom that looks like a cotton candy machine exploded. Pink tiles, mint sink, and a medicine cabinet full of tonics promising cures for nerves, digestion, and existential dread. Everything in here seems designed by someone who loved colour but absolutely hated your retinas. The tiles are glossy, the sink is cheerful, and the bathtub is a powder blue time capsule that radiates confidence despite being slightly chipped around the edges. Even the toilet wears a matching pastel seat cover, as if it too must participate in the aesthetic at all times. You shut the door gently, knowing full well it offers about as much privacy as a wet tissue. There is no lock because in this era, trust and boundaries are something people mention but never practice. At any moment, a sibling might barge in, a parent might knock, or the family dog might decide you've been alone too long and must be checked on immediately. The mirror above the sink is slightly warped, giving you a funhouse version of your face before school. It's the 1950s, so no one acknowledges body image in a healthy way anyway. Below the mirror is a tiny chrome shelf holding an assortment of grooming tools that look like they belong more in a dentist's office than a family home. Metal nail file, tweezers with the tension of a bear trap, a comb that has absolutely seen things, and then there's the medicine cabinet. You open it slowly, half expecting confetti to fall out. Inside is a museum of mid-century medical confidence. Glass bottles with labels like soothing nerve drops, gentle stomach bitters, and headache powder. Use liberally, ask no questions. There's a jar of vapor rub strong enough to clear every sinus on the block, plus a box of bandages so rigid they could double as siding for the garage. The soap is shaped like a seashell and smells like something you'd politely pretend to like. The toothbrushes all stand in a cup together, bristles touching, like a group therapy session waiting to happen. There's a tin of tooth powder nearby, a gritty substance that promises to whiten your smile while simultaneously sanding down the enamel. You turn on the sink. It groans like it's waking up from a bad dream, and after a moment delivers cold water with the force of someone spitting. The hot water works, technically, but only after making noises that strongly suggest a ghost lives in the pipes. When it finally reaches your hands, it alternates between pleasantly warm and scalding enough to make you reconsider your life choices. Behind you, the shower curtain hangs stiffly from its rod, patterned with pastel flamingos or seashells or something else that feels vaguely tropical and deeply confusing. The curtain rings screech when you touch them, a metal-on-metal shriek that announces your bathing intentions to the entire household. Privacy is a myth. Everyone now knows you're trying to be clean. Inside the tub, you find the world's most unforgiving bath mat. It has suction cups that refuse to suction and a texture designed specifically to exfoliate your entire foot, whether you asked for that service or not. The tub faucet drips rhythmically, the soundtrack of a home slowly unravelling but doing so stylishly. You reach for a towel from the nearby rack and discover it has two settings, decorative and sandpaper. The fluffy towels are not for use, they are for display. If you accidentally use one, a parent materializes instantly to scold you for disrupting the towel shrine. The towel available to you is rough, slightly damp, and smells faintly of last week's bath. A knock comes from the hallway. Someone needs the bathroom, urgently, dramatically, as if you've been in here for hours instead of 3 minutes. You assure them you're almost done, even though you know there is no being done, only surrendering your spot to the next person. You take one last look around the pastel sanctuary. Everything is absurd. Everything is charming. Everything is vaguely unhygienic. But it works, most of the time, and the house would feel strangely incomplete without its candy-coloured chaos. And as you step out, yielding the room to whoever is bouncing impatiently outside, you realise something. In the 1950s, bathrooms weren't just functional spaces. They were tiny battlegrounds of style, noise, obligation, and shared chaos. A place where pastel dreams met the reality of family life. And no one, absolutely no one, ever got to use the bathroom alone. Your morning routine involves hair cream with the consistency of axle grease, toothpaste that tastes like chalk, and soap that could probably strip paint off a Buick. You look down at the bathroom counter, which is covered in grooming products that look like they were invented by people who believed pain was a sign of effectiveness. Everything comes in a tin, a glass jar, or a metal tube that will absolutely pinch your fingers if you squeeze it wrong. Packaging is sturdy because the contents are volatile. You start with the soap because tradition insists you smell fresh before leaving the house, even if fresh in the 1950s is defined as strong bouquet of antiseptic hospital corridor. The bar is rock hard from years, yes, years of air exposure. You lather it between your hands and it produces exactly one bubble followed by a burning sensation that suggests it contains industrial solvent. This scent is advertised as mountain pine, but it smells more like the aftermath of a lumberyard fire. Next comes the toothpaste. It slides out of the metal tube with a crackling sound, like it's been inside too long and is resentful about being freed. The flavour is mint-adjacent, but mostly chalk with hints of sadness. You begin brushing, trying not to think about the fact that fluoride isn't standard yet, so you're brushing for the experience rather than the protective value. Every stroke feels gritty, like your toothbrush is made of tiny judgmental sandpaper elves. Then comes the hair cream. It stares at you from its tin, thick and shiny, the colour of something that definitely shouldn't go on your body. You scoop a small amount, which immediately clings to your fingers like it's auditioning to become part of your identity. The smell is powerful, masculine perhaps, in the way a mechanic's shop is masculine. You work it into your hair, creating a style that could withstand hurricane-force winds and possibly repel insects. At this point, your hands are so greasy that washing them becomes a logistical puzzle. You scrub, rinse, repeat, but the hair cream clings stubbornly. You begin to suspect that nothing short of divine intervention, or the Buick stripping soap, will remove it. You choose the latter, It burns, it tingles, it feels alive, but gradually your palms return to a natural, non-lubricated state. On the shelf beside you sits a bottle of aftershave. You're not shaving, but the bottle calls to you with its faux masculine promises of ruggedness and sophistication. It's the 1950s equivalent of cologne, a liquid that smells like spicy alcohol and regret. You open the bottle and dab a tiny bit on your neck. Instant sting. The kind of sting that makes you momentarily reconsider the nature of masculinity. You smell like every dad in 12-house radius, sharp, citrusy, and slightly flammable. Then there's deodorant. Aerosol cans are just beginning to gain popularity, but today's option is a roll-on with the texture of cold glue. It drags across your skin like a reluctant snail. The smell is mild, powdery, and determined to lose effectiveness by lunchtime. If you're a girl, the situation is equally dramatic. Setting lotion that crackles as it dries, cold cream thicker than cake frosting, lipstick with the same waxy shine as a Crayola crayon, and a curling iron that is basically a hot metal stick you're expected to trust near your face. Beauty routines in this era are not for the faint of heart. They are quests. You glance at the bathroom mirror. Your hair is glossy and immovable. Your face smells like antiseptic mint pine citrus, an aroma that can't be found in nature. Your skin has survived multiple chemical confrontations and looks surprisingly normal, considering. A sudden knock on the door reminds you that someone else urgently needs to endure this same ordeal. You gather your products, wipe the counter, and step into the hallway smelling like a hybrid between a mechanic, a peppermint, and a freshly polished diner booth. As you walk toward the kitchen, you feel oddly accomplished. You've navigated the gauntlet. You've survived the sting, the burn, the goo, the grit. You've prepared yourself for the day with products that seem to have been invented by people who care deeply about appearance and absolutely nothing about comfort. And as you breathe in the sharp, medicinal aroma drifting from your own body, you realize, in the 1950s, personal grooming isn't about feeling good. It's about looking like you feel good, even if the products you used could probably clean an engine block. You step outside into a neighborhood so uniform it feels like a simulation. Every home proudly displaying a perfect lawn and a slightly repressed family behind the curtains. The air smells like freshly cut grass, car exhaust, and the lingering hint of eggs from someone's breakfast. If you squint, you can almost see the homeowner associations of the future forming like storm clouds. Every house on this street is a tribute to the post-war dream. Little boxes lined up in obedient rows painted in soft, friendly colours that imply stability even when everyone inside is held together with coffee and denial. You walk down the sidewalk, smooth, newly poured concrete, bright enough to reflect your worries back at you. Neighbours are already out performing their morning rituals. Mr. Henderson is hosing down his driveway, even though nothing is on it. He waves, smiling the smile of a man trying to convince everyone, including himself, that he's doing great. You wave back, participating in the daily suburban pantomime of shared cheerfulness. Every yard is manicured to an almost unsettling degree. The grass is the exact same height across the entire neighbourhood, as if one single cosmic barber trimmed them all at once. The lawns gleam with dew and every blade stands at attention like soldiers in an absurd, chlorophyll-rich army. Children aren't allowed to run on them yet. Dog paws are strictly regulated. The lawns are sacred. Then there are the houses themselves. Matching roofs, matching shutters, matching mailboxes. If you accidentally wandered into the wrong home, you might not realise it until you saw a family portrait featuring strangers with the same haircut as your family members. Even the front doors look identical, each adorned with a welcoming wreath that says, "We are normal, and no one here has ever cried into a casserole." A breeze passes by, rattling wind chimes that somehow all play the same vaguely spiritual melody. You glance up and see Mrs. Carter peeking through her curtains, performing her morning surveillance. She pretends she's watering plants, but you both know she's trying to catch the gossip before it becomes gossip. In the 1950s, neighborhood intelligence networks operate with the speed of light and the accuracy of a poorly tuned radio. You keep walking, and soon the sounds of suburbia blend into a comforting but faintly ominous chorus. The hum of vacuum cleaners, the sputter of lawn mowers warming up for battle, the clink of glass bottles being set out for the milkman, the slap of a newspaper hitting a door with strategic force. Everything is predictable, rhythmic, dependable. And yet beneath that predictability lies a tension everyone senses but no one acknowledges. Behind each mailbox, each pastel wall, each lace-curtained window is a family doing their absolute best to look perfect. Parents argue quietly about bills after the kids go to bed. Children practice smiles for school picture day. Teenagers dream of escape while polishing the chrome on their bicycles. It's a grand performance stitched together by expectations, etiquette, and the fear of being the weird house. You pass the Johnsons' house. Their son is out front bouncing a red rubber ball, the kind that will soon fly into the street, triggering Dad to sprint heroically as if saving the family honour. Across the road, Mrs. Lee sweeps her porch, even though it is, as always, spotless. Sweeping is not a chore here. It is a message to the neighbourhood that she is thriving. Every so often a car drives by, long, heavy and shiny, like a pastel battleship floating across a sea of conformity. The driver waves politely and you wave back. Everyone waves. It's required by suburban law. Refusing to wave would raise questions, and questions are dangerous here. And yet, for all its uniformity, the neighbourhood has a strange warmth. Children leave their bikes in piles on the grass. Dogs trot freely as if elected mayor. Someone always bakes something, and someone always shares it. Neighbours gather on porches, exchanging small talk and borrowing sugar as though it's a currency. You take a deep breath. Beneath the identical exteriors, the people aren't identical at all. They're just humans navigating the pressures of an era that demands perfection, while quietly knowing perfection is impossible. And as you stand there, watching the sunlight wash over the row of matching houses, you realise the truth of 1950s suburbia. The homes may be the same, the lawns may be synchronised, but inside each house lives a different story, a mix of hope, worry, laughter, grief, love, and the kind of weekly drama that never makes the history books, but absolutely shapes the world inside these carefully painted walls. Your neighbour Frank is already mowing his lawn, glaring triumphantly as if achieving enlightenment through grass maintenance. You suddenly understand why your parents never relax. The man pushes his mower with the solemnity of a monk, the intensity of a soldier, and the competitive spirit of an Olympic athlete who has trained his entire life for this singular suburban moment. His lawn is his temple, his battlefield, and his emotional support system, all trimmed to a uniform height that defies the laws of nature. Frank catches sight of you and lifts his chin ever so slightly, just enough to say, "Yes, behold my horticultural glory." You nod back, unsure whether congratulating him would help or merely escalate the situation. The thing about 1950s suburbia is that lawn care isn't a hobby, it's a way of life, a silent war. A turf-based Cold War played out in clippings and soil. Men wake up early not because they want to, but because someone else might mow first and steal the dopamine rush of neighbourhood superiority. Your own father steps outside moments later, sees Frank mowing and freezes. It's the freeze of a man who knows he is now required by honour, masculinity, and the invisible suburban code to respond. His coffee cup lowers. His tie flutters in the morning breeze like a battle flag. Without saying a word, he sets the mug down and retrieves the mower from the garage, as if arming himself for combat. You watch as Dad pulls the starter cord once, twice, 3 times. The mower sputters, coughs, then roars to life with the dramatic flourish of an old man finally sitting up from a nap. Dad begins mowing with renewed purpose, eyes narrowed, shoulders squared. This is no longer yard maintenance. This is war. You observe the rituals unfolding. Lawn mowing must be performed in straight lines, never diagonal, never chaotic. A man's honour is measured in the precision of his stripes. Dad pushes the mower with robotic determination, occasionally glancing over at Frank to see if he's watching. Frank pretends he isn't, but his eyes flick over every few seconds, tracking Dad's progress with the vigilance of a hawk monitoring rival territory. Soon, other neighbours emerge, drawn by the sound of the mowers like moths attracted to incredibly noisy flames. Mr. Peterson appears with his hedge trimmers, clipping his bushes with tiny anxious snips. Across the street, Mr. Alvarez uncoils his garden hose with a flourish that suggests he's been waiting for this moment since dawn. The entire street is alive with buzzing, trimming, clipping, and occasional grunting. You stand there thinking, these men could solve international conflict if they approached diplomacy the way they approach lawn edges. The competition intensifies when someone brings out a manual edger, the suburban equivalent of drawing a sword. It creates a perfectly neat border between lawn and walkway, which causes an immediate ripple of panic among the other dads, who suddenly feel the need to edge their lawns too. Dad disappears into the garage and returns with his own edger, looking like a man who has remembered he also has a weapon in this fight. Meanwhile, the women of the neighbourhood observe from windows and porches with expressions that blend fondness, confusion, and mild appraisal. They know the outcome of these battles will influence the social climate for at least a week. A crooked line could be the difference between being invited to the next Tupperware party or being silently judged during grocery store encounters. Children look on with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. They know what comes next. Once the mowing is finished, once the edges are perfect, once the clippings are bagged or mulched, their chore lists will mysteriously grow. Someone will need to rake, someone will need to sweep the sidewalk, someone will inevitably spill something and start the cycle over. By midday, the lawns glisten under the sun like proud green carpets. Frank steps back from his mower and surveys his kingdom. Dad does the same, hands on hips, chest slightly puffed. A mutual nod is exchanged, an armistice signed without a word. Later, as the afternoon quiets and the mowers fall silent, a strange peace settles over the neighbourhood. The lawns are perfect. The men are content. The suburban equilibrium is restored at least until one of them gets the idea to fertilise. And as you watch these quiet warriors return to their homes, grass clippings stuck to their socks, you realise lawn care isn't about the grass. It's about proving you are trying your best in a world that constantly demands perfection. One stripe, one trim, one deeply competitive glance at Frank at a time. Inside, Mum is performing Olympic-level multitasking, cooking, cleaning, disciplining, ironing, and possibly holding back tears. Though society insists she is thrilled about everything. You watch her glide, or power walk, from stove to sink to laundry basket, with the focused determination of a woman who has accepted that she is the structural support beam holding the entire family together. The apron tied around her waist is cheerful, floral and misleading. It suggests a carefree afternoon of baking cookies, when in reality it is body armour for a full-scale domestic marathon. She flips pancakes with one hand, sorts mail with the other, and uses her elbow to nudge the radio dial when the announcer starts talking about something too upsetting for morning hours. Yesterday's gloves and scarves are drying on the radiator. A pot roast is already thawing for tonight, and somewhere in the distance you hear the unmistakable sound of an iron hissing in anticipation of another battle with wrinkles. Every task she performs emits its own soundtrack. The broom swishes across the floor in small, irritated arcs. The vacuum roars like a dragon that swallowed a sock. The washing machine thumps in the basement, shaking the house as it wrestles with a load of clothes larger than its own capacity. Mom adjusts her headband, inhales sharply, and returns to stirring something on the stove that absolutely smells like it could feed an army battalion. Meanwhile, the phone rings, the rotary phone, which has all the urgency of a time bomb because you never know who's on the other end. A neighbour, a relative, a telemarketer, a PT, a mother who just wanted to remind everyone about the bake sale. Mum answers with a voice so sweet it could make Honey jealous, even though you can see the exhaustion flicker across her face like a porch light in a storm. When she hangs up, she heads straight for the ironing board. Ironing in the 1950s isn't a chore, it's a sport. A test of strength and endurance, involving dangerously high heat and the constant threat of burning your fingers or your sanity. Mum smooths out shirts and dresses with precise, almost military movements. She presses collars as if the future of the nation depends on crisp edges. And through it all, she maintains that smile, the smile society demands of her, the smile that says, "I'm fine, I love this, I live for this," even though deep down she's probably fantasizing about a week-long nap, or possibly running off to join a commune where laundry folds itself. In between chores, she corrals the younger kids with the efficiency of a seasoned general. No running in the house. Put that down. Yes, you have to go to school. No, you cannot have a third bowl of cereal. She disciplines with one hand while flipping a grilled cheese with the other. She negotiates sibling disputes like a diplomat brokering peace between nations that threw crayons at each other 5 minutes ago. Her days are long, repetitive, and wildly underappreciated. Yet she performs each task with pride because that's what the era demands. A mother must be strong but soft, tired but tireless, capable but quiet about it. She's expected to maintain a home so spotless it could be featured in a magazine, raise emotionally stable children in a time when no one spoke about emotions, create meals that meet nutritional standards invented by people who have never cooked, and be ready to greet company at any moment with perfect posture and fresher lipstick than should be legally required. You watch her for a while, absorbing the rhythm of her routine, the clatter of dishes, the rustling of laundry, the faint hum of a woman who never stops moving because if she does, something might fall apart and not just the casserole. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, there's a quiet power, a pride, a resilience born from love and necessity. She knows her work keeps this household spinning. She knows that without her, breakfast would be chaos, shirts would be wrinkled, and the family schedule would collapse into a black hole. She may be under pressure, underappreciated, undervalued, but she is unbreakably strong. As she wipes her forehead with the back of her hand and offers you a tired but genuine smile, you realise. In the 1950s, mums aren't just homemakers. They're the unsung superheroes of suburbia, holding the world together with bobby pins, casseroles and a smile sturdy enough to survive anything, even the PTA. You accompany Mom to the grocery store, a fluorescent wonderland where canned goods dominate every aisle, and you're fairly sure half the food is just salt held together by marketing. The automatic doors slide open, releasing a gust of air so cold it feels like the store has its own microclimate. Inside, everything gleams, polished floors, towering displays, and signs promising deals that may or may not be real. Mum grabs a cart, one with a squeaky wheel, because that is the law of grocery stores, and begins her journey with the determination of a woman racing against the clock, the budget, and her own sanity. The first aisle greets you with an ocean of canned vegetables, peas, corn, beans, carrots, entire gardens captured in metallic cylinders, destined to taste vaguely of tin. Every can brags about convenience, nutrition, and long shelf life, though you suspect the vegetables inside are barely clinging to their identities. Mum tosses them into the cart with the practiced efficiency of someone who knows exactly what she needs and precisely how far her weekly budget can stretch. Next comes the cereal aisle, a brightly coloured temple of sugar. Cartoon mascots grin at you with suspicious enthusiasm, offering prizes that are definitely choking hazards. Mum will allow a box of something wholesome, but only after you endure a lecture about tooth enamel, hyperactivity, and not letting marketing make you foolish. You nod solemnly, knowing full well you will inhale that cereal in 2 days. Further down, the store's soundtrack shifts to the hiss of refrigerated cases. You approach the dairy section, where milk bottles stand at rigid attention and butter is wrapped like tiny gold bars. The refrigeration fogs the glass, making everything appear slightly mystical, like treasure hidden in a frosty cave. Mum inspects the expiration dates with the intensity of a detective solving a cold case. Then there's the meat counter, guarded by a butcher who wears a white apron stained with the history of 1,000 pork chops. He greets Mom with a friendly nod, offering deals fresh as this morning, even though you suspect he says that at all hours. The slabs of beef, chicken, and unidentifiable cuts glisten under harsh lighting. Everything looks faintly intimidating, like it's challenging you to a duel. Mum selects a moderate package, enough to feed the family without requiring her to auction off furniture. The middle aisles are where she becomes truly strategic. Flour, sugar, Crisco, Jello mix. She knows the price of everything down to the penny. You watch her compare labels, frown at inflation, then mutter something about how store brands are the same thing with cheaper outfits. Into the cart they go, and then you reach the frozen food section, the futuristic realm of icy promise. Boxes of TV dinners display meals arranged in perfect little trays, each compartment brimming with colour and optimism. Mum eyes them, tempted by the idea of convenience, but ultimately shakes her head. She still believes home cooking is necessary for moral development. You suspect she's exhausted. Somewhere between bread and cleaning supplies you lose track of her. Grocery store mums move fast. They duck into aisles with ninja-like skill, scanning sales, hunting bargains. Eventually you find her by following the sound of a cart rattling slightly too aggressively. She has acquired coupons. Things are about to get intense. In the checkout line, Mum stacks items with mathematical precision. Heavy things first, then fragile ones, then bread like a soft crown atop the tower. The cashier rings everything up with the speed of a pianist performing a concerto. Mum watches each number flash by, eyebrows tightening with every beep. At the end, she hands over a stack of coupons large enough to qualify as a novella. The cashier sighs, but uses them anyway, as bags fill with the week's necessities, canned vegetables, sturdy meat, Looney Tunes cereal, Jello destined for a questionable dessert. You help load them into the cart. Outside, the sun feels warm again after the artificial chill of the store. Mum pushes the cart toward the car with a look of triumphant exhaustion. She has done it. She has fed the family for another week. She has defeated the fluorescent labyrinth. And as you ride home, surrounded by paper bags rustling like applause, you realise the grocery store isn't just a place to buy food. It's a battlefield of budgets, bargains, choices and expectations. A place where convenience whispers, marketing shouts, and every mum becomes a quiet hero, navigating aisles of chaos so her family can gather around the dinner table and say, "This is pretty good," even when half the meal came from a can. Mum meets with other women to exchange recipes, gossip, and the occasional existential crisis disguised as a discussion about curtains. You follow her into the living room, which has been transformed into a battlefield of quiet social competition. The doilies are straightened, The good ashtray has been deployed. The coffee table glistens with a shine so reflective you could probably use it to send distress signals. Every pillow has been karate chopped into perfect triangles, an aggressive gesture of hospitality. Soon the doorbell rings, and the women file in like a parade of pastel cardigans. Their smiles sparkle, their lipstick gleams, and their eyes dart around the room, assessing everything at speeds that would classify them as military-grade surveillance equipment. Each woman carries something: a casserole, a plate of cookies, a handmade napkin holder, or emotional baggage disguised as a new Jell-O mould idea. Mum ushers them in with a warm smile, masking the tension of someone who has scrubbed the house so fiercely she may have altered the structural integrity of the paint. They settle themselves into the best chairs, skirts smoothed, ankles crossed at polite angles. Someone compliments the curtains, and Mum laughs a little too loudly, because in the 1950s, curtains are not decoration, they are declarations. They announce to the world whether you are thriving or barely holding it together. The conversation begins lightly. Recipes are exchanged as though they are state secrets. "Oh, it's my mother's," someone says, casually handing over a card that contains instructions so vague it might as well read, "Just do your best and pray." Another woman insists there's no miracle more powerful than adding condensed soup to anything. Heads nod. This is doctrine. Then the gossip begins, softly at first, like wind rustling through the leaves. Who bought a new washing machine? Who's behind on their bills? Who put their trash out on the wrong day and is clearly spiralling emotionally? You sip lemonade and watch these women weave a tapestry of suburban intelligence. The men think they run the neighbourhood, but these women know everything. Mum leans in to share her own tidbit, but another woman interrupts with a story about Mrs. Callahan's scandalous new haircut. Apparently, it's shorter than shoulder length, which in 1950s suburbia is basically the equivalent of announcing you've joined a rebellion. The air grows thick with sugary treats and polite tension. Compliments begin to bounce around the room like decorative bullets. "Oh, I love your blouse. Oh, your house looks bigger than the last time. Oh, is that a new recipe?" How brave! Every phrase is layered with meaning. None of it is accidental. Eventually the meeting shifts into its true purpose, solving the emotional crises no one is allowed to name. Someone mentions being tired, and suddenly everyone nods with the seriousness of philosophers contemplating the human condition. But instead of saying life is overwhelming, they say things like, "Sometimes I think my dryer isn't drying like it used to." Mom murmurs sympathetically. Everyone understands the code. Someone suggests they all try a new crafting project together, because nothing distracts from the crushing expectations of domestic life, like gluing felt onto other felt. Another woman politely declines because she has too much to do, which is suburban shorthand for "I'm hanging on by a thread." They eat cookies, perfect little creations shaped like flowers or stars or abstract interpretations of exhaustion. You take one, it's dense, possibly a weapon. As the afternoon winds down, the women gather their coats and casseroles, each leaving with a new recipe card, slightly bruised ego, or fresh gossip to distribute like pamphlets. Mom waves as they go, smiling warmly until the door shuts. Then she sighs, one long exhale that carries relief, fatigue, and the unspoken truth that these gatherings keep her sane, even when they nearly drive her insane. You look at her, still holding a plate of cookies that taste like sugar and suppressed ambition, and you realise women's social clubs aren't just meetings, they're survival groups. Emotional triage dressed up in pearls, a place where women build community, vent subtly, support quietly, and wage tiny domestic wars with grace. And through it all, they keep smiling, because in the suburbs, the show must always go on. You roam miles from home on your bike, no helmet, no sunscreen, and no adult supervision, just vibes, scraped knees, and a peanut butter sandwich in a wax paper bag. Your bike wobbles slightly as you gain momentum, the metal frame rattling with the determination of a machine built before safety standards were invented. The handlebars are sticky from last summer's melted popsicles, and the seat is uncomfortable enough to make you question whether childhood joy should come with this much thigh pain. But none of it matters. You are free. Entirely, wildly, irresponsibly free. The sun is already warming your shoulders, and you can feel your skin beginning its slow transformation from healthy glow to future dermatologist visit. Sunscreen has not been invented yet, or maybe it has, but no one takes it seriously. Your only protection is the thin layer of dust accumulating on your arms as you pedal through the neighborhood like a tiny outlaw. You ride past perfectly trimmed lawns and wave at neighbors who absolutely do not know where your parents are. They wave back, unbothered. It is morning, the world is mostly peaceful, and the assumption is that kids, like cats, simply roam and eventually return for food. At the end of the block, you spot your friends, an unruly herd of children with scuffed shoes, mismatched socks, and the chaotic energy of little humans who have never heard of risk assessments. One kid is carrying a stick taller than he is. Another has pockets full of something suspiciously alive. A third has clearly stolen a roll of caps for his toy gun, judging by the faint smell of a gunpowder trailing behind him. Together, you head toward the woods at the edge of the neighborhood, where danger and imagination mingle freely. The trees loom above you like ancient guardians of questionable decision-making. Birds chirp overhead. A creek babbles nearby, daring you to fall in. Someone suggests building a fort. Someone else suggests catching frogs. The loudest kid suggests doing both at once. You dump your bike in a pile with everyone else's, creating a metal sculpture your parents would faint at the sight of. Then you head deeper into the trees, stepping over logs, sticks, and the occasional rusted object you absolutely should not touch, but will. The hours stretch ahead like a landscape of possibility. You scrape your knee within the first 10 minutes. You do not care. You rub some dirt on it and keep going because emotional resilience in the 1950s is built through minor injuries and complete lack of supervision. Eventually, hunger calls. You sit on a rock, unwrap your peanut butter sandwich, now warm and slightly squished, and devour it like it's gourmet cuisine. Your friends trade pieces of their lunches, pretzel sticks, apple slices, half a cookie someone's mum burned a little but packed anyway. It is a feast. A dusty, crumb-covered feast. After lunch, the adventures escalate. Someone finds a rope swing over the creek. It looks unsafe, homemade, and potentially cursed. Naturally, everyone takes turns using it. You scream joyfully as you swing out over the water, the rope creaking like it's recounting its regrets. You land in the mud, triumphant. Childhood is simple. If you're not slightly dirty, you are doing it wrong. Later, you all discover an abandoned shed, an irresistible treasure chest of rusted nails, forgotten tools, and spiders of impressive size. You poke around, convinced you're uncovering secrets. The truth is you're mostly finding tetanus, but that is tomorrow's problem. As the afternoon sun dips lower, a distant voice echoes through the trees. Someone's mum yelling their name with the pitch of a clarinet in distress. One by one, your friends peel off toward their homes. You hop back on your bike, legs tired, face smudged, heart full. You arrive home sunburnt, muddy, and blissfully exhausted. Mum takes one look at you and sighs, then tells you to wash up before dinner. No one asks where you were. No one wonders who you were with. The unspoken agreement is simple. Kids leave, kids come back, kids survive. And as you collapse onto the front steps, peeling dried mud from your shins, you realize childhood in the 1950s isn't just free. It's feral, a delirious blend of danger, independence, scraped knees, warm sandwiches, and the kind of freedom adults will later romanticize because they know they'll never get it back. School is a place where discipline reigns. The smell of chalk permeates everything, and teachers carry rulers like medieval weapons. You step into the classroom and immediately inhale what feels like a full scoop of powdered limestone. Chalk dust floats in the air like a persistent ghost, settling into your hair, your lungs, and your future memories. The blackboard dominates the room, large, intimidating, green instead of black, and covered with equations written in handwriting sharp enough to damage the board itself. Your desk creaks ominously as you sit. It's made of a wood so ancient it probably remembers the Depression. On top is a hinged compartment that never quite closes correctly, and always smells faintly of pencil shavings and childhood desperation. You slide your books inside, careful not to disturb the loose papers that tend to explode onto the floor at the slightest provocation. The teacher enters with the solemn authority of a judge, commander, and fortune teller all in one. Her shoes click sharply across the floor, a rhythm that signals the end of joy and the beginning of arithmetic. She doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. The ruler in her hand says everything. It taps against desks, chalk trays, and occasionally the side of her own palm, a warning shot across the bow. "Eyes on your work," she says, surveying the classroom with hawk-like intensity. And you obey, because the alternative is discovering exactly how accurate she is at smacking a desk from 10 feet away. The lessons begin. Reading, writing, times tables recited in unison like an incantation. Everyone pretends to understand fractions, which are presented with the calm confidence of a concept that definitely makes sense, even though half the class is quietly panicking. The chalk squeaks across the board in long strokes, leaving behind white trails that sprinkle the air like tiny chalky snowflakes. You cough, quietly, another cough. The teacher glances your way, and you immediately decide breathing is optional. Around you, kids fidget, shift, whisper. The room is alive with tiny rebellions, notes passed through sneaky hands, doodles drawn inside textbooks, gum chewed discreetly beneath desks even though gum is absolutely forbidden and rumoured to cause instant detention. You join the covert operations by drawing a spaceship in the margin of your worksheet, because schoolwork is better with aliens. At recess, freedom arrives like a blast of oxygen. You sprint outside with your classmates colliding into sunlight and noise. The playground is a Darwinian obstacle course made entirely of metal. Monkey bars designed to burn you in summer and freeze you in winter, a slide so tall it should require parental consent, and swings that encourage dangerously ambitious heights. Children race around barefoot, shrieking with a kind of reckless abandon that would give modern parents heart palpitations. But recess is short, and soon the bell rings with the finality of a courtroom verdict. Back inside you go, lungs still aching from chalk dust, shins bruised from playground politics. Afternoon lessons feel longer. The teacher reads aloud from a textbook that seems older than she is. History class tells tales of explorers with impossible bravery, while social studies insist the future will be full of flying cars and polite international cooperation. A wildly optimistic stance for any decade. At some point, someone inevitably misbehaves. A whisper too loud, a paper airplane seen mid-flight. The teacher pauses, every head turns. A silence falls so heavy it might crack the floor. She says the student's name in a tone that could extinguish the sun. The offender is sentenced to standing at the front of the room or writing lines, which is the 1950s version of psychological warfare. By the time the final bell rings, you feel older, wiser, and coated in a fine layer of chalk that you will continue shedding for days. You gather your books, shove them unceremoniously into your bag, and shuffle toward the door with the slow, triumphant exhaustion of someone who has survived something. Outside, the air smells fresh again. Grass, sunshine, and freedom, clearing out the chalk fog still clinging to your lungs. Other kids pour into the street, celebrating the end of another academic battle. The world feels bigger again, brighter, less full of rulers. And as you walk home, you realize school in the 1950s isn't just a place to learn. It's an endurance test, a training ground, a chalk-dusted arena where children navigate discipline, social hierarchies, and the terror of long division, all while trying to avoid a ruler that is allegedly just for pointing, but everyone knows better. You navigate a playground made of metal bars, sharp edges, and questionable engineering, every surface hot enough to fry an egg by June. It is a place forged not for children, but against them. A glittering metal coliseum shimmering under the sun like a warning. Every structure here has the energy of something designed by an engineer who wanted to teach children about gravity, friction, and emotional resilience all at the same time. And yet this is paradise. This is freedom. This is recess. First, there's the slide, the towering silvery behemoth that stands proudly at the centre of the playground like a monument to poor impulse control. It rises high above the sandpit, daring children to climb its ladder, a ladder composed entirely of thin metal rungs heated to temperatures usually associated with molten lava. You grab the rails, feel the burn, and make a split-second decision. Keep climbing, because social status depends on it. When you reach the top, the view is incredible. You can see the whole schoolyard, the baseball field, the swings swaying ominously, and 40 children all yelling at the same time. Then it's your turn to slide. You sit legs straight, hands gripping the sides. The metal is so hot it sears through your shorts, but you commit. Down you go, picking up blistering speed, your hair blown back, your soul leaving your body. You hit the bottom with the force of a small explosion, skidding into sand that immediately fills your shoes. A triumph, a rush, a light concussion maybe, but worth it. Next, the monkey bars. A series of metal rings hung at a height just tall enough to terrify you, but just short enough to shame you if you refuse. Every kid eyes them with reverence and fear. You grab the first bar. It's hot, slippery, and carries the faint scent of every child who has ever fallen from it. You swing hand over hand, the bars rattling like an old train car, until your arms feel like they are detaching from your body. Falling means landing in sand, which, today, feels like a warm, gritty frying pan. You push through. You make it. You are a champion. Nearby sits the seesaw, an instrument of emotional negotiation. Two children must agree to cooperate, something that almost never happens. One kid inevitably outweighs the other, turning the seesaw into a medieval catapult. You sit on one end, gripping the handle with the sincerity of someone drafting a will. Suddenly, the other child slams down, launching you skyward with enough force to momentarily glimpse the curvature of the earth. You crash back down with a thud that rattles your teeth. Both children laugh. This is considered fun. Then there's the merry-go-round, an innocent-looking round platform that doubles as a centrifuge for testing human limits. Children cling to the bars while others sprint alongside it, pushing faster and faster until the laws of physics file a complaint. You hop on, gripping tightly as the world begins to blur. You feel the pull of centrifugal force tugging you outward, begging you to let go and experience aerial flight. Someone falls off, someone else throws up. The rest cheer. Meanwhile, the swings sit in a quiet row, long chains gleaming in the sun like tiny steel interrogation tools. You hop onto one and pump your legs, rising higher and higher, the wind whipping through your hair. There is always one child determined to swing high enough to loop over the bar, a feat physically impossible, yet passionately believed. The lunch monitor blows her whistle. No one listens. The playground rules written on a faded wooden sign are laughably optimistic. No running, already broken, no pushing, impossible. Take turns. A myth. Kids run in packs, forming alliances, staging games of tag that span the entire blacktop, inventing new sports that involve nothing but a ball and a willingness to ignore pain. Recess ends with a shrill whistle blast, summoning everyone back inside. Children stagger off the playground like survivors of a very cheerful battle, knees scraped, hands blistered, hair wild, shoes filled with sand, hearts full. And as you walk back into the classroom, still tingling from adrenaline and heat stroke, you realise the playground isn't just a place to burn energy, it's a proving ground. A chaotic, sun-scorched arena where children test physics, courage, balance, and the limits of their childhood bodies, and somehow emerge stronger, dirtier, and absolutely thrilled to do it all again tomorrow. You plop yourself in front of the TV, hypnotised by cowboy shows so dramatic they might as well be operas for 10-year-olds. The screen flickers to life, a soft electric hum filling the living room like the purr of a content cat. The picture wavers for a second, light, dark, light again, before settling into a grainy black and white world where justice is delivered by men in oversized hats and horses with suspiciously good comedic timing. The sound is slightly fuzzy, as if the TV is whispering from another dimension. But you don't care. You're in the zone. You're not just watching cowboys. You are one. You sink deeper into the couch, the cushions swallowing you slowly, like quicksand made of upholstery. This couch has texture, real texture, the kind that leaves patterns on the backs of your legs. You have no intention of moving. The world could be ending outside, but inside, a sheriff is confronting an outlaw in melodramatic slow motion, and that takes priority. Your school bag lies abandoned near the door. Homework sits inside, radiating guilt, but it's no match for the pull of afternoon television. The TV doesn't judge you. The TV doesn't ask for fractions. The TV says, stay here. Watch this overly intense showdown. You deserve this. A commercial break erupts, sudden, loud, aggressively cheerful. A toothpaste ad insists that without their product you will never amount to anything in society. A cereal jingle worms its way into your brain so deeply you'll be humming it in your sleep. A hostess in a starched dress demonstrates a vacuum cleaner with the enthusiasm of someone trying to sell salvation. Every commercial is a mini-story, a moral lesson wrapped in jingles, promises, and questionable nutrition claims. Then back to the cowboys. The camera zooms dramatically on a pair of squinting eyes. You lean forward. The hero's horse snorts. You lean even more forward. A tumbleweed rolls by, carrying with it the weight of destiny. The hero does something bold, noble, unnecessary, or all three at once. The villain does something dastardly, predictable, and strangely relatable. The music swells like an orchestra learning its instruments in real time. By now you are fully sprawled across the rug, the static warmth of the TV screen bathing your face in a glow that screams childhood. You rest your chin on your hands. You consider, briefly, that life in the Wild West seems stressful. Dust storms, bandits, cacti. But then you remember that cowboys never have homework, and suddenly the Wild West feels appealing again. Behind you, Mum works in the kitchen. You hear pots clanking, the rhythmic beat of a wooden spoon tapping a bowl, and the occasional sigh of someone contemplating whether dinner will cook faster if she stares at it. But she doesn't check on you, she doesn't hover. The TV has you, and for this hour that is enough. The show shifts. Now a quiz program hosted by a man with hair so glossy it could double as a mirror. Contestants answer questions with the confidence of people who slept more than you did last night. You yell the answers at the screen even when you're wrong. Especially when you're wrong. Another commercial promises a toy that will change your life forever, even though it's just a plastic cowboy that falls over if you breathe on it. You stare, mesmerized, convinced this toy will unlock new meaning in your existence. You vow to ask for it repeatedly until your parents give in, or mysteriously lose their hearing. Then, as the late afternoon sun slants through the window, turning dust motes into glitter, something magical happens. You start drifting. Not quite asleep, but deeply lulled. The narrator of yet another cowboy show drones on about frontier justice. Your eyelids droop. The warmth from the TV and the soft buzz of the room wrap around you like a blanket. By the time Mum calls you for dinner, you're not sure if you actually watched anything, or if the TV simply hypnotized you into a peaceful stupor. You peel yourself from the carpet, dazed, blinking like a desert traveller emerging from a sandstorm. And as you shuffle toward the dinner table, one truth settles comfortably into your tired bones. After-school TV isn't entertainment, it's therapy. A black and white babysitter raising an entire generation of sunburnt, exhausted children, so their parents could have one single hour of silence. And honestly, it works. Dinner involves some unholy mixture of noodles, tuna, and crushed chips, baked into something that is either comfort food or a cry for help. You stare at the bubbling masterpiece on the table, its surface shimmering beneath a layer of potato chips that have sacrificed their crunch in the name of domestic duty. The smell is complex, warm, a little fishy, slightly burnt around the edges, the kind of smell that could either hug your soul or haunt your dreams. It's impossible to know which until you take the first bite. Mum sets the dish down proudly, as though unveiling a sculpture she created in partnership with a divine but chaotic muse. In the 1950s, casseroles are not just meals, they're cultural events. They say, I fed my family, I stretched my budget, and I used every canned ingredient in the pantry because that's how we survive around here. Dad sits at the head of the table, loosens his tie, and picks up his fork with the solemnity of a man preparing for battle. The casserole stares back. It crackles faintly. Someone, probably you, wonders if it's alive. Dinner begins with the typical rituals, Grace is said. Plates are passed. A sibling immediately complains. Mum gives a look that could freeze lava. The complaining stops. The casserole is served, steaming and unapologetic. You take your first bite. It is surprisingly good. Or maybe your taste buds have been conditioned by years of exposure to canned soup. The noodles are soft, the tuna provides protein, a word adults whisper reverently, and the chips on top offer a textural experience best described as confused but willing. Each bite feels like a warm handshake from someone wearing wool mittens. Dad eats with gusto because hunger trumps skepticism. He dives in, occasionally making a pleased grunt that doubles as encouragement for everyone else. Mum watches the table with quiet satisfaction, hoping no one notices the experimental ingredient she added from a magazine recipe titled Feed Your Husband Faster. The conversation is a predictable whirlpool. How was school? Fine. What did you learn? Nothing. This exchange satisfies the requirements of parental engagement for the evening. Your siblings kick each other under the table, performing a silent ballet of aggression that only ends when someone yelps loud enough to attract attention. Dad raises an eyebrow. All kicking ceases immediately. The casserole witnesses everything. Halfway through the meal, Mum mentions that there's gelatin salad in the fridge for dessert. She says this like she's offering treasure, and perhaps she is. The gelatin contains fruit suspended mid-air like prehistoric insects trapped in amber, an edible time capsule. The dinner table collectively nods. Jell-O is the Switzerland of desserts. Neutral, colourful, and always welcome. Back at the casserole front, the dish is holding strong. Its structure is questionable, but its heart is pure. You poke at it with your fork and uncover a layer of melted cheese. Unexpected, unnecessary, yet comforting. Mum insists cheese makes everything better. She's right. As dinner progresses, Dad launches into a monologue about work, something involving a co-worker named Bill, who may or may not be incompetent. Mum nods sympathetically, while secretly tallying how many dishes she'll wash later. You tune out the adult noise and focus on constructing the perfect forkful. A little noodle, a hint of tuna, a bit of chip, a smidge of cheese. The science of casserole eating is complex and deeply personal. Eventually, the dish dwindles. Only burnt noodles remain, sticking defiantly to the casserole pan like ancient hieroglyphs of suburban struggle. Mum stands, gathering plates with the mechanical efficiency of someone who has performed this ritual thousands of times. Dad pats his stomach, satisfied. Good dinner, he says, which in Dad language is the highest possible compliment. Mum beams. The casserole has succeeded. The family has been fed. Civilization will continue for one more day. As you carry your plate to the sink, you glance back at the table. The crumbs, the empty glasses, the faint smell of fish and melted cheese, it all feels strangely tender. Chaotic, yes. Questionable, absolutely. But tender. And it hits you. Dinner in the 1950s isn't about the food. It's about togetherness. It's about routine. It's about the heroic act of turning pantry randomness into something edible, and the even greater heroism of sitting down as a family to eat it. Because in a world full of pressures, expectations, and surprise tuna, the dinner table is one of the few places everyone still gathers, even if they're silently praying tomorrow isn't another casserole night. Dad walks in, loosening his tie, exhaling the weight of capitalism, and immediately reaching for the evening newspaper to pretend everything is fine. The front door closes with a soft thud, a sound that signals the end of one performance and the beginning of another. His shoes scrape across the entryway, long tired steps that echo through the house like Morse code messages from a man who has absolutely met his quota for human interaction today. The leather is worn in the exact places where stress settles, the toes, the heels, the places where he braces for the next meeting that should have been an email if emails existed yet. He hangs his hat on the hook. It droops slightly, mirroring his posture. Dad used to walk into rooms with the energy of a man who believed the world was conquerable. Now he walks in like someone who was conquered instead, by paperwork, deadlines, and a boss who pronounces his name wrong. Mum greets him warmly, offering that trademark smile that says, "I'm glad you're home, but also please don't ask me what the children have done today." Dad nods, squeezing her shoulder gently. This is their daily exchange. Brief, tender, efficient, a moment of calm in a house that is almost always one sibling quarrel away from chaos. He heads straight for his armchair, the throne of suburban fatherhood. The cushion has moulded perfectly to his shape, partly from comfort, partly because he collapses into it every evening like a deflated accordion. The newspaper is already waiting for him, folded with the precision of a man who believes information is best consumed in orderly columns. He flips it open with a dramatic rustling sound that could frighten small animals. Headlines scream about politics, foreign affairs, inflation. Dad doesn't read most of it. He scans. He grunts. He sighs. It is the sacred ritual of pretending to absorb current events while actually decompressing from the office. Every so often, he mutters something about Eisenhower, or how gas used to be cheaper, which is impressive given that gas is still practically pocket change. Nostalgia comes early for men of this era, often by 5 p.m. sharp. But even in his sanctuary, Dad is not entirely off duty. A child appears at his side holding a school paper, desperate for praise or forgiveness. Another hovers behind the chair, clearly having done something they hope Dad won't notice until after dessert. Dad sets the newspaper down with reluctant authority and offers sage advice, or vague advice, depending on his energy levels. "Just do your best," he says, a phrase designed to solve everything while solving nothing. After a few minutes, he attempts to stand. The chair resists, as if trying to keep him from facing adulthood again. Eventually he escapes and wanders toward the kitchen, following the scent of dinner like a cartoon character floating toward a fragrant pie. He lifts lids, pokes at pots, asks, "Smells good. What is it?" in a tone suggesting he might not emotionally survive if the answer is another casserole. Mum shoos him away. He retreats to the doorway, leaning his shoulder against the frame in a pose that says, "I am helping by being present." He watches her work, admiration and exhaustion mixing in his eyes. When dinner is served, Dad sits at the head of the table, shoulders squaring out of habit. This is the one place he still feels undeniably important. He passes plates. He asks the children about their day, bracing himself for answers involving recess injuries, playground betrayals, or something a teacher said that he doesn't fully understand but nods through anyway. And then, after the meal, after the dishes, after confirming that yes, homework must be done and no, bedtime is non-negotiable, Dad returns to his chair. The newspaper is waiting. So is the soft glow of the lamp and the comforting illusion that everything is under control. He loosens his tie a little more, exhales the last of the day's frustrations, and lets the quiet settle around him. The home may be loud, imperfect, chaotic, but it's his refuge. His one place where he doesn't have to sell anything, prove anything, or negotiate anything except who left their toys on the stairs again. And as you watch him drift into his evening routine, paper in hand, shoulders finally lowering, shoes kicked off, you understand something. Dad isn't just coming home. He's returning to the small, fragile universe he carries on his back, the one he works for, worries for, sacrifices for, the one place where, no matter how stressful the day has been, he can pretend everything is fine until tomorrow. Everyone gathers in the living room to play games, watch TV, and politely ignore tensions simmering beneath the surface like a jello mould that never set. The living room glows under the warm yellow light of a lamp with a shade so large it could double as a parachute. This room, carefully curated by Mum to appear perpetually photo-ready, now transforms into the family arena, equal parts cozy bonding experience and psychological minefield. The furniture is arranged to promote togetherness, though everyone manages to angle their bodies away from one another in subtle gestures of emotional self-preservation. Dad sits in his favourite armchair, the springs groaning under the weight of a man who has fought capitalism all day and would prefer not to fight his children tonight. Mum perches on the couch, posture elegant, expression serene, masking the quiet exasperation of someone who has asked the same child to stop bouncing on the cushions 6 times already. The kids gather around the coffee table where a collection of board games waits like ticking time bombs. Monopoly, Clue, Sorry, each one a gateway to either genuine joy or familial catastrophe. Tonight the family settles on a classic, Monopoly, also known as the game that ruins Thanksgivings. Dad opens the box with solemn ceremony, removing the tokens as if handling ancient relics. "You can be the car," he says, sliding it to you, an honour, but also a responsibility. Your siblings grab the dog and the thimble, both convinced they are now invincible. Mum chooses the iron, probably because it is the most honest representation of her daily workload. The game begins peacefully enough. Money changes hands, properties are purchased, everyone makes diplomatic comments like, "Oh, how nice and good for you," as though each transaction isn't a step toward financial annihilation. But tensions rise quickly. Dad's tone shifts when he realizes someone has purchased his favorite property. Mum's smile tightens when someone lands on her hotel by accident and groans dramatically. A sibling accuses another sibling of cheating. Someone flips the chance card too aggressively. The dog token tumbles to the floor. Civilizations have collapsed over less. To calm the atmosphere, Mum suggests switching to something more cooperative: television. The suggestion is accepted with the unanimous relief of a ceasefire. Dad turns the dial on the TV and the screen flickers to life, showing a wholesome family comedy that everyone pretends to enjoy equally. The laugh track echoes through the room, smoothing over the leftover Monopoly injuries. Mum knits quietly. Dad pretends not to fall asleep. You curl up with a blanket that smells like dryer sheets and childhood security. But even television has its own brand of passive aggression. Someone complains about the channel. Dad refuses to change it because this is what we're watching. Mum offers the world's softest sigh. A sibling repeatedly asks what time dessert is. You calculate how many minutes until bedtime based on how many commercials you've endured so far. Eventually, Dad does fall asleep, lightly snoring in a way that suggests he's dreaming about mowing the lawn. Mum gives the children a look that says, "If you wake him, so help me." Everyone suddenly becomes very invested in staying quiet. A commercial for soap airs, promising happiness, cleanliness, and maybe spiritual transcendence if you buy their brand. Mum's eyes glaze over, Dad snores louder. The kids stare at the ceiling. Television, you realise, is its own form of meditation. After the show ends, dessert appears, a bowl of pudding or gelatin moulded into a shape that defies geometry. Everyone eats silently, as though participating in a solemn ritual. The sweetness soothes lingering resentments. A sibling apologises half-heartedly for earlier. Mum accepts. Dad is still asleep. Finally, bedtime approaches. Mum begins herding children like a shepherd guiding mildly feral sheep. Dad wakes with a jolt, insisting he wasn't sleeping. The board game remains on the table, unresolved, an artifact of earlier conflict waiting for tomorrow's archaeological team. As you head down the hallway, you glance back at the living room. The lamp still glowing, the TV cooling down, Mum quietly folding a blanket, Dad pretending he knows what the show is about. And it dawns on you. Family time in the 1950s isn't perfect. It's chaotic, funny, tense, tender, competitive, and deeply human. It's love delivered in glances, jokes, shared bowls of pudding, and the collective decision to pretend nothing is wrong even when everything feels just a tiny bit off. But it is togetherness, and in this decade, togetherness is the glue, sometimes sticky, sometimes brittle, but always enough to hold a family through the night. You help with chores that seem specifically designed to teach children that life is labour, drying dishes, taking out trash, and occasionally holding a flashlight for Dad like you're assisting in surgery. The evening hums with the rhythm of domestic obligation. The kitchen is still warm from dinner, steam rising from the sink like it's exhaling after a long day. Mum stands at the counter, sleeves rolled neatly, washing dishes with a determination that suggests she's in a one-woman battle against grease, grime, and the crushing expectations of mid-century housekeeping. Your job, your sacred duty, is to dry those dishes with a towel that never fully dries anything. It mostly moves the moisture around. But that counts as helping. Every few plates, Mum gives you a nod of approval, the kind of nod that says, "Good. You're learning responsibility," even though you're pretty sure you're just learning how to stack bowls in a way that won't lead to an avalanche at 11 p.m. Next comes the trash, or an odyssey. You tie the bag with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb, because if the knot fails, the consequences are catastrophic and extremely smelly. You haul it outside like a tiny disgruntled dock worker, feeling the bag shift ominously in your hands. The night air is cool on your face. Crickets chirp. Somewhere, a neighbour's dog barks at absolutely nothing. You toss the trash into the metal can, which responds with a loud clang that echoes through the neighbourhood like a warning shot. Then comes the chore every child dreads, flashlight duty. Dad summons you to the garage, where he stands over a mysterious half-disassembled household object, a toaster, a lawnmower, a pipe, a car part, something. It doesn't matter what it is, because 1950s dads will attempt to fix anything with nothing but a wrench, sheer confidence, and whatever loose screws are lying around. He hands you the flashlight, which is heavy, dented, and emits a beam of light only when it feels emotionally ready. Your job is to hold it steady while Dad mutters about manufacturers, communists, and the declining quality of American steel. He asks you to shine it right there, pointing vaguely at a cluster of bolts. You try. The light goes everywhere except where Dad needs it. He sighs, adjusts the angle himself, and resumes tightening something that may not be connected to anything. You stand there, arms slowly going numb, trying not to blink too loudly. Every few minutes, Dad gives an update on his progress, which is always contradictory. This blasted thing'll never work again. Followed by, almost got it. Followed by, they don't make 'em like they used to. Followed by, hand me that screwdriver. You hand him a wrench. He uses it anyway. It works. Other chores await you inside. Sweeping, for instance, which looks simple, but quickly becomes an existential crisis, because every crumb you sweep reveals another crumb you missed. The broom bristles scrape across the floor like a judgmental old man. Dust collects in stubborn corners, forming alliances with lint and hair. Eventually you declare victory, even though the dustpan clearly disagrees. Laundry folding is next. Towels fight back. Pillowcases warp themselves into interpretive shapes. Socks go missing in ways that suggest supernatural involvement. Mum has developed folding techniques so complex that you're convinced she could pack an entire family into one suitcase if she really tried. As you help, she thanks you with that soft, tired voice, the kind that makes you realise chores aren't just about work. They're about family cooperation, survival, and keeping the house from collapsing into chaos. Later, Dad emerges from the garage triumphant, holding the repaired toaster like a hunter displaying a freshly caught deer. The whole family pretends to be impressed, and Dad beams with the pride of a man who has restored order to the universe with a wrench and a prayer. When the final chore is done, you collapse on the couch, exhausted from a night of drying, lifting, sweeping, and illuminating Dad's mechanical monologue. Your hands smell faintly of dish soap and old metal. Your socks are dusty. Your arms ache pleasantly. And yet, something warm settles inside you. The feeling of having contributed, even in small ways, to the household machine that keeps everything running. Because in the 1950s, chores aren't punishments. They're rites of passage, bonding moments disguised as labour. Lessons about responsibility, teamwork, and the strange thrill of holding a flashlight perfectly still. And as you drift towards sleep, you realise the house runs on casseroles and coffee. But it survives on the small hands helping, the tired smiles shared, and the nightly ritual of doing hard things together. You witness adults gathering for polite conversation, meticulously arranged snacks, and the slow unravelling of their sanity. The living room has been transformed into a stage for suburban performance art. Mum has polished every surface until the house gleams like a museum exhibit about the American dream, 1954 edition. A doily sits under every object. Every pillow has been fluffed and arranged according to regulations set forth by the National Association of Women Who Care Too Much About Throw Pillows. The guests arrive in waves, each one holding a dish wrapped in foil, a nervous smile, and a desire to convince everyone they're doing just fine. They remove their coats, smooth their hair, adjust their pearls. Their husbands, if they've been dragged along, stand stiffly near the wall like decorative mannequins waiting for someone to activate them. A Tupperware representative stands by the dining table, which has become a shrine of plastic marvels, burping lids, stacking bowls, containers that promise freshness, order, and the illusion of control. She's enthusiastic in a way that suggests she has either consumed too much instant coffee or is desperately trying to meet a sales quota that determines whether she wins a new blender. The demonstration begins. She lifts a Tupperware lid and presses it down with a flourish. Burp. The room gasps. Someone applauds. Someone else looks genuinely emotional. In this decade, a container that seals properly might as well be a religious miracle. Meanwhile, the food table groans under the weight of deviled eggs, Ritz crackers, Jell-O salads that wobble with malice, and casseroles whose ingredients cannot be identified by modern science. The dips are mysterious, the toothpicks plentiful, and the presentation immaculate. The women mingle first, floating from cluster to cluster like synchronized fish in pastel cardigans. The conversation is light, polite, expertly coded. "Oh, I love your dress," means I see you're trying. "That casserole was interesting," means don't make that again. "We must get together sometime," means we absolutely will not. You watch as Mum navigates these currents with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. She laughs, nods, offers cookies, receives compliments with humility only slightly cracked around the edges. She's performing, gently, elegantly, like everyone else, because the suburbs run not on gasoline or electricity but on mutual illusion. The men, meanwhile, gather near the coffee table, talking about weather patterns, lawn strategies, and the latest antics of their co-workers. Each man adopts a posture of casual superiority, as though he alone understands the complexities of sprinkler systems and 2% mortgage rates. Their laughter is slightly too loud, slightly too strained, polished with the brittle shine of men pretending not to be exhausted. As the evening deepens, the mask of perfection begins to slip subtly. One woman mentions being so tired lately, and everyone nods with sympathy that is far too intense for the comment. Another confesses that her youngest child refuses to sleep through the night, and suddenly the circle erupts with stories of tantrums, stubbornness, and the quiet suffering of parents who haven't had a full REM cycle since Truman was in office. The Tupperware lady tries to steer things back toward product demonstration, but the group has moved into emotional triage. The women are now confessing fears, hopes, irritations, disguised, of course, as conversations about recipes, curtains, and laundry detergent. You can practically feel the room exhale as everyone acknowledges, in coded language, that suburbia is lovely and also sometimes a slow-moving emotional avalanche. By the time dessert is served, pie with a crust that could double as construction material, the adults are laughing more freely. Shoulders relax, jokes land. Someone admits they burnt dinner last week. Someone else admits they sometimes hide in the bathroom for quiet. A man confesses he doesn't actually understand how his lawnmower works. The group nods, relieved. Vulnerability, though mild and brief, has arrived. Finally, the guests gather their coats, offer a flurry of polite goodbyes, and step back into the calm darkness of the neighbourhood streetlights. Mum closes the door, leans against it, and sighs with the soft heaviness of a woman who has survived another evening of emotional juggling. You look around at the crumbs, the empty cups, the abandoned Tupperware catalogue, and you realise suburban nightlife isn't loud or wild. It's quiet, careful, communal, and a little desperate. A place where adults try to convince themselves and each other that they're keeping it all together. One casserole, one polite compliment, and one perfectly sealed plastic container at a time. Your nighttime routine includes brushing your teeth with mint plaster and drinking warm milk that tastes like moral discipline. You stand in the bathroom staring at the toothbrush in your hand like it's a medieval weapon you've been forced to wield. The toothpaste oozes from the metal tube with a thick, chalky resistance, landing on the bristles in a paste that looks medicinal and tastes like someone melted a breath mint into drywall. You scrub your teeth dutifully, aware that this is less about hygiene and more about parents ingraining character. Strong enamel, strong values, strong tolerance for bad flavours. The mirror fogs slightly as you breathe, reflecting the dim yellow glow of the bathroom light. Your hair is mussed, your pyjamas slightly too stiff, and the faint echo of Dad clearing his throat drifts down the hallway like an auditory reminder that peace is mandatory after 8 p.m. You spit into the sink and watch the paste swirl away, chalk dust and mint evaporating into the plumbing as if fleeing the scene of a crime. Then comes the warm milk. Mum hands you a cup with the seriousness of a doctor prescribing life-saving medication. The milk is thick, steaming softly, with a smell that insists you behave yourself. You sip it reluctantly, feeling it coat your throat in a way that suggests it is preparing you for a life of restraint, order, and early bedtimes. The warmth spreads through your chest, heavy and oddly comforting, as though the milk is giving you a gentle lecture about responsibility. The house quiets around you. The television clicks off with a soft snap, the kind that officially signals the transition from evening to bedtime, a shift as absolute as the dropping of a stage curtain. Dad folds his newspaper. Mum adjusts the living room throw blanket that no one is allowed to use. Siblings scatter toward bedrooms, each performing their own routine of denial and bargaining. Down the hallway, the lights dim one by one. The house settles into its nighttime posture, creaking, sighing, mumbling old wood complaints. Even the refrigerator softens its hum, as if trying not to disturb anyone. You climb into bed, the sheets cool and crisp in a way that reminds you your mother ironed them, which seems excessive but also deeply soothing. Your blanket is thick and slightly scratchy, tucked around you with military precision. Comfort in the 1950s often doubles as restraint. Mum enters with a glass of water you didn't ask for but are expected to appreciate. She fluffs your pillow, turns down the lamp, straightens a picture on the wall that wasn't crooked to begin with, and gives you a goodnight kiss that smells faintly of vanilla and exhaustion. Dad appears in the doorway behind her, offering a gruff but affectionate night now, which is father language for I love you, but emotions frighten me. The room dims to a soft glow. Shadows gather in corners but remain friendly, shaped by the patterns on your quilt and the slant of moonlight through the curtains. You hear the soft murmur of your parents talking in the next room, voices low, tired, carrying the weight of everything they keep hidden from the kids, because adulthood is a mystery best left for later. You wiggle deeper under the covers, feeling the milk continue its slow descent through your stomach like a warm, friendly brick. Sleep edges closer, but not without a gentle tussle. Your mind wanders to school tomorrow, to chores, to whether your bike chain is still loose, to the strange mystery of Mom's gelatin salads, to why adults drink so much coffee, to whether cowboys ever feel nervous before duels. Childhood anxiety doesn't announce itself, it just quietly climbs into bed beside you. But the weight of the blanket, the softness of the pillow, and the muted symphony of a house winding down all work together to hush the noise inside your head. You breathe in, you breathe out. You listen to the far-off hum of streetlights and the faint clicking of the cooling radiators, and gradually the milk does its work. Your eyelids flutter, your thoughts dissolve into slow, blurry shapes. The house, once buzzing with chores and conversations and casseroles, now cradles you in its pastel arms. Because bedtime in the 1950s isn't just about sleep, it's a ritual, a moment of enforced stillness, a nightly ceremony meant to teach children that tomorrow will come early and you'd better be ready. You drift toward dreams, tasting the faint ghost of toothpaste and warm milk, slipping gently into a world where even your worries grow quiet, at least until the alarm radio clicks on again at 6 a.m. Your bedroom is decorated with rockets, cowboys, or ponies, depending on your parents' vision for you, and it's either too hot or too cold at all times. The door creaks as you step inside, revealing the chaotic wonderland of mid-century childhood decor. The wallpaper is bold, too bold, covered in repeating patterns of whatever theme your parents chose before asking your opinion was fashionable. Rockets zoom across constellations in perfect formation. Cowboys ride endlessly towards suns that never set. Ponies rear on prairies that loop infinitely along the walls like a technicolor stampede. It's immersive and a little overwhelming, like sleeping inside a cereal box. Your bed sits beneath this mural of enthusiasm, covered in a quilt so aggressively tucked that you need upper body strength to loosen it. The sheets are crisp, cold, and slightly stiff, as though they are enforcing discipline even while you sleep. The pillow is lumpy in one corner, flat in the other, giving you two choices: neck pain or face numbness. Temperature control is not part of the package. In winter, the room becomes a tundra. You can see your breath some nights, and the only heat comes from a small vent that seems to blow exclusively into the hallway. You add extra blankets until you can barely move, turning yourself into a decorative throw pillow for 8 hours. In summer, the room transforms into a desert ecosystem powered by pure sunlight and your home's complete lack of insulation. A single box fan sits in the window, humming loudly as if contemplating its life choices. It moves the hot air around but never cools it. You lie there sweating quietly, feeling like you're being slow roasted for dinner. Against one wall stands your dresser, painted in a cheerful pastel colour that is trying too hard. The drawers stick when they feel like it, requiring a special combination of jiggling, pulling and bargaining. Inside are neatly folded clothes Mom arranged with military precision. The top drawer holds socks that never match the same shade of white, no matter how much bleach is involved. Beside the dresser sits a bookshelf full of childhood classics, school-required reading, and comic books hidden behind the more respectable titles. There are toys scattered across the floor, tin soldiers frozen mid-salute, marbles that roll under the bed to form a colony, and a yo-yo that has never once behaved as the instructions suggested. On your nightstand sits a lamp shaped like a rocket ship or a horse, or a vaguely smiling clown, whichever theme your parents selected without considering future nightmares. The light it emits is dim and yellow, casting long dramatic shadows that turn innocent objects into emotional threats after 9 p.m. The lamp gets hot quickly, too, and touching it feels like shaking hands with the sun. Posters hang crookedly on the walls, movie cowboys in dramatic standoffs, astronauts floating near cartoon planets, ponies galloping through meadows like they've got nowhere urgent to be. They lift at the corners whenever the wind from the fan hits just right, flapping like they're trying to escape. At the foot of the bed is your prized possession, a metal toy chest painted with bright colours and filled with everything you cherish, fear or don't want Mum to see. Baseball cards wrapped in rubber bands, a slingshot you swear you never use irresponsibly, a rock collection whose scientific importance is unclear, a drawing you made that everyone praised, but no one could identify. Once the lights dim, the room changes personality altogether. The shadows stretch, elongate, and settle into ambiguous shapes that mimic cowboys mid-duel or rockets mid-launch. The wallpaper patterns, once exciting, now feel slightly alive. Every sound magnifies at night. A floorboard sighs. A branch taps the window. The house breathes. You pull the blanket to your chin and remind yourself that everything is normal, even if it doesn't sound like it. Temperature still refuses to cooperate. You're either freezing from the draft sneaking under the window or overheated from the blanket fortress you meticulously constructed. There's no middle ground, only extremes. Yet for all its quirks, its wild themes, its strict bedding, its volatile climate, this room is yours. A small universe where imagination fills the spaces insulation forgot. A place where dreams launch like rockets, gallop like horses, or ride into the sunset on a cardboard cactus. And as you close your eyes, listening to the ticking clock and the far-off hum of the fan, you realise something. Your bedroom may not be perfect, it may not even be reasonable, but it is the one place in the 1950s where you can exist exactly as you are, sweaty, shivering, dreaming, growing, caught somewhere between childhood wonder and the quiet anxieties they don't have a name for yet. Every appliance in the house hums, rattles, or clanks as though performing a sad mechanical symphony. You lie in bed listening to it all, each creak, each sputter, each mysterious thump. Like the house is confessing its deepest insecurities one noise at a time. The refrigerator starts things off, humming with the exhaustion of a machine that has been chilling leftovers since the Roosevelt administration. It growls low, then high, then settles into a vibrating sigh as though reconsidering all its life choices. Next comes the water heater, a creature of pure chaos. It pops, it cracks, it lets out sharp metallic pings that sound like someone dropping marbles down a metal pipe. You've asked adults about this noise before, and the answer is always the same. That's just what water heaters do. This is not comforting. This is the language of denial. The pipes join in next. They rattle with enthusiasm, shaking inside the walls like they're trying to escape and pursue a career in jazz. Sometimes they bang so loudly that you're convinced a ghost is practicing percussion in the crawl space. But everyone insists it's normal. Everything in the 1950s is normal, even when it sounds like a battle between gremlins and plumbing. The clock on your nightstand is perhaps the boldest member of the nocturnal orchestra. Its ticks are not gentle. They're assertive, confident, judgmental. The ticking fills the room like a metronome conducting the entire household's anxieties. Tick, did you finish your homework? Tick, don't forget your lunch tomorrow. Tick, you really should call Grandma more often. Tick, time is slipping away, kid. Better keep up. Somewhere downstairs, the dishwasher groans dramatically, even though it is only washing 3 plates and a cup. It swishes aggressively, like an athlete overtraining for an event that does not exist. The machine rattles, pauses, then resumes with a deep mechanical sigh, as though emotionally preparing itself for the rinse cycle. Then there is the radiator. The radiator does not make normal heat-related sounds. It bangs like it's trying to break out of its metal cage. It wheezes with the tortured breath of a Victorian ghost. Sometimes it hisses so sharply that you sit upright in bed, convinced a snake has entered the heating system. Adults wave this off too. That's just the pipe settling. Into what? A haunted dimension. You remain unconvinced. Even the outdoor noises contribute to the nightly concert. A branch taps the window with the persistence of someone politely demanding entrance. The wind whistles through the thin window panes, slipping into your room with a cold breath that feels mildly judgmental. Somewhere down the street, a dog barks at literally nothing, perhaps joining the house in its sorrowful chorus. And then, when the appliances lull, when the pipes rest, when even the clock seems to soften its ticking, you hear it, the house settling. Every house in the 1950s settles, a term adults use casually, as though the entire structure creaking ominously in the dead of night is a relaxing phenomenon. The floors groan, the beams shift. You swear the walls exhale. It's the sound of a building remembering all the lives moving inside it. all the casseroles baked, all the secrets whispered, all the laundry folded. It is tender, eerie, and ancient. Yet somehow, within this orchestra of mechanical anxiety, there is comfort. A strange reassurance that the house is alive in its own clunky, unpredictable way. The noises become familiar companions. Odd, yes, but loyal. They remind you that even when the world outside feels big and unknowable, this messy, noisy, imperfect home is holding you through the night. As your eyelids grow heavy, the hums blend together, the clanks soften, the rattles stretch into long, sleepy vibrations. Eventually, the whole house settles into a slow, rhythmic lullaby. A lullaby only a 1950s home could sing. And finally, wrapped in the soundscape of groaning appliances and whispering walls, you drift into dreams, comforted not by silence, but by the steady, imperfect heartbeat of the place you call home. Every appliance in the house hums, rattles, or clanks, as though performing a sad mechanical symphony. Your house doesn't sleep. It pretends to, just like your parents, just like the neighbours, just like everyone in the 1950s who believes silence is achievable if you simply wish hard enough. But the second the lights go out and you tuck yourself under your aggressively starched sheets, the machinery of suburban domesticity reveals its true personality. The refrigerator is always the first to speak. It lets out a low, mournful hum, followed by a rattling sigh that makes it sound like it has lived through several wars and is tired of keeping everyone's leftovers cold. It shudders occasionally, just enough to make you wonder if it's plotting its escape. If any appliance in this house is harbouring secrets, it's the fridge. Next, the radiator joins in. It does not gently warm the room. No, it clanks and hisses like a creature awakening from an ancient slumber. The pipes vibrate. A low rumbling travels through the floorboards. At some point, always around midnight, the radiator emits a sudden metallic bang that could easily be mistaken for an intruder. Every 1950s child hears this noise and thinks the same thing. Well, this is how I die. But the adults insist the radiator is perfectly normal, which feels suspicious because nothing that sounds like a blacksmith forging weapons at 12:03 a.m. is normal. Then there's the water heater in the basement. It makes echoing gulps and gurgles as if swallowing its own despair. Occasionally it burps loudly enough to travel through 3 floors. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling thinking, is the house hungry? Should I feed it? Does the water heater need emotional support? The kitchen clock ticks with self-importance. Loud, unwavering, judgmental. Each second echoes down the hallway like a reminder that time is marching on whether you're ready or not. The tick gets louder the closer you are to falling asleep. By midnight it sounds like someone is tapping a spoon against a saucepot with slow, ominous intent. Somewhere in the distance, the washing machine spins out the last of its existential dread. Earlier today it violently shook itself across the laundry room like it was trying to flee its responsibilities. Now it emits a tired drone, as though dreaming about a future where it's allowed to retire. The floors creak too, always at the worst times, footsteps that aren't footsteps, groans that aren't groans, wood expanding, contracting, and complaining like an old man telling a story no one asked for. Each creak feels personally targeted. You try ignoring them, they creak louder, and then the wind. Outside, it pushes against the house with the persistence of a door-to-door salesman. It whistles through the window frame because insulation is merely a suggestion in this decade. Curtains sway gently. Shadows stretch across your bedroom walls in shapes that absolutely look like lurking cowboys or rocket-shaped ghosts. You pull the blanket up to your nose. Occasionally a neighbour's dog begins barking at nothing, a ghost perhaps, or the existential weight of being a suburban dog. Another dog replies. Soon 4 or 5 dogs join the chorus, participating in a nightly ritual known as "we bark because we can." Back inside, the freezer cracks, the dishes settle, the toaster clicks for no apparent reason, and the house settles deeper into its nighttime personality, a giant wooden pastel machine filled with secrets, sighs, and questionable noises. You lie there listening to this orchestra of mechanical emotions, the sounds weaving together like threads in a calming but slightly unhinged blanket. Oddly, the longer you listen, the more comforting it becomes. These noises have always been here. They're part of the house, part of your childhood, part of the strange companionship you share with the machines that run your world. You inhale, you exhale. A soft vibration from the fridge, a metallic whisper from the pipes, a hum from the fan, the soundtrack of the American night. And as sleep slowly pulls you under, you realize the house isn't noisy because it's old. It's noisy because it's alive, a rattling, humming guardian doing its best to hold the family together. One clank, groan, and exhausted sigh at a time. Your parents insist the neighborhood is perfectly safe, even as they triple-check the windows and worry silently about everything. It's a strange contradiction unique to the 1950s. Adults preach absolute security while performing nightly rituals that suggest they trust nothing. Dad walks through the house, turning each lock with the solemnity of a priest sealing a temple. Mum tugs on the latch behind him to make sure it really took. Then she checks the other latch, then the one she just checked. Meanwhile, both of them remind you cheerfully, nothing bad ever happens around here, in a tone that absolutely sounds like they're trying to convince themselves. The neighborhood is supposedly idyllic, manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, tidy hedges, and streets quiet enough to hear your own thoughts echo. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, not because it's safe, but because the idea of locking them feels like an admission that danger exists. And admitting danger is simply not part of the mid-century aesthetic. Yet as bedtime approaches, the facade begins to crack. Dad peers through the curtains, scanning the street for suspicious activity, which includes teenagers walking, dogs barking, cars existing, and the wind. Mum asks, "Did you hear that?" Every 8 minutes, Dad replies, "Just the house settling, even though the house has been settling aggressively for the past 10 years and shows no signs of stopping." Earlier in the day, your parents reassure you constantly. Everyone knows, everyone. Crime doesn't happen here. You kids can roam free. But at night, their tune changes. Suddenly, they're discussing newspaper headlines they won't let you read. Suddenly, they're whispering about the Henderson's cousin's friend who had an incident in '49. Suddenly the milkman seems a little too chatty. The truth is, the suburbs run on two emotional states, daytime optimism and nighttime dread. Outside, the streetlights glow softly, flickering slightly like tired guardians. The shadows stretch long and still across the lawns. Every rustle, a leaf, a squirrel, a neighbour's curtain shifting sounds like the beginning of a noir film. And your parents feel all of it. Dad double-checks the shed. Mum checks the stove, even though dinner was 6 hours ago. Dad relocks the back door. Mum relocks the relocked back door. A system of checks and balances that no founding father could have predicted. But they never acknowledge this fear directly. Instead, they offer a steady stream of cheerful half-truths. You have nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. Go to sleep. Meanwhile, Dad stands at the window like he's guarding the neighbourhood from Cold War intruders, communists disguised as travelling salesmen or raccoons. Inside the house, the atmosphere is both cosy and taut. Warm lamplight spills across the carpet, mixing with the soft hum of appliances. But underneath that comforting glow is a quiet thrum of worry, parental, ever-present, expertly disguised beneath pleasant smiles. Mum settles into her evening routine, pretending to read a magazine while actually listening for unusual noises. Dad pretends to be absorbed in his crossword puzzle, though he has been staring at the same 3 clues for 20 minutes. Their bodies sit in chairs, their minds patrol the perimeter. The irony, of course, is that the doors are often still unlocked, not on purpose, just out of habit. Safety, in their minds, is as much about belief as action. If you believe you're safe, maybe the world behaves accordingly. It's a charming idea, slightly delusional and profoundly 1950s. You walk through the hallway, sensing the strange duality of the era. A society fully convinced of its security, yet constantly reinforcing its fragile edges. You peek into the living room and catch your parents sharing a quiet look, a look that says, "We're doing our best," beneath the veneer of "everything is wonderful." And as you climb into bed and listen to the muted murmurs of their nightly rituals, locking, unlocking, reassuring, worrying, you understand something important about suburban life. Safety isn't the absence of danger, it's the effort your parents make to create a world where you don't notice it. Their doors may stay unlocked, their hearts absolutely do not. Every worry lives there, packed away behind polite smiles and steady voices, so that you can fall asleep believing the world outside is simple, calm, and kind. And maybe, for tonight, that illusion is enough. At last, the house settles. A quiet suburban darkness falls, but beneath it you feel the faint pulse of dreams, worries, and hopes, like every family holding its breath until morning. The stillness arrives in gradual waves, softening the edges of the day until everything becomes muted and hazy. The lamps have been switched off one by one, their warm glow fading into memory. The carpet cools under your bare feet. The air grows heavier, quieter, as though the house itself has exhaled after hours of pretending to be endlessly cheerful and functional. Mum and Dad have retreated to their room. Their voices, once floating clearly through the living room, are now muffled, a low hum of conversation blending with exhaustion. You can't make out the words, but you hear the cadence, that nightly inventory of concerns they can't discuss during daylight. Bills, repairs, school notices, the kind of thoughts parents bury under smiles at breakfast and pull out again after the children are tucked away. Your siblings are asleep, some sprawled sideways across their beds like weary starfish, others curled tightly like hibernating squirrels. Soft snores drift through the hallway. Somewhere a blanket rustles. Somewhere else a small thump suggests someone rolled into a wall. It is the sweet chaos of a house full of dreams. You venture quietly to your bedroom window and peek outside. The street is still. Identical houses lined up like patient sentinels, their silhouettes crisp under the moonlight. The streetlights glow in their usual watery halos, illuminating small patches of sidewalk that look strangely magical when everyone is asleep. The lawns, earlier the battlegrounds of competitive masculinity, are now resting peacefully, dew forming on their freshly trimmed blades. Far in the distance, a dog barks once, just once, as if checking in, then dissolves back into silence. A passing car hums through the night, headlights sweeping briefly across the houses like a spotlight for an audience that isn't there. Then even that fades. Inside, the house creaks, a soft settling that feels more like a sigh than a noise. The wooden beams contract in the cooling air, making tiny popping sounds. The staircase groans faintly as if adjusting its posture. The refrigerator, exhausted from a full day of chilling milk and leftovers, drifts into a lower, sleepier hum. These noises, once alarming in childhood, become familiar lullabies, signals that your home is alive, even in its rest. Lying in bed, you become acutely aware of the small, comforting details of nighttime life, the faint tick of your bedside clock, the subtle flutter of curtains letting in a breeze, the whisper of leaves outside brushing against each other, the soft rhythmic breaths of everyone under the same roof. This is when suburbia feels most honest. Without the noise, without the posture, without the bustle of routine, you can sense the real heartbeat beneath the facade. Every family on your street, behind every pastel door and every polished window, is navigating its own hopes and anxieties. Some parents stay up late whispering about money. Some quietly dream of different futures. Some replay the worries of their children in their heads. Some simply collapse into bed and let tomorrow deal with itself. Even you, tucked beneath your blanket fortress, feel the mixture of comfort and uncertainty that comes only at night. The strange hush before sleep, the mind flipping through memories of the day like a deck of cards, the awareness that morning always arrives faster than you expect. But eventually the weight of fatigue settles in. Your eyelids grow heavy. The room darkens further, not because the lights have changed, but because your thoughts begin to soften at the edges. The hum of appliances turns into a steady, soothing rhythm. Your breath matches it. Your heartbeat slows. The world outside becomes a distant, gentle blur. And then, drifting off, you realize something profound in the simplest way. Midnight in the 1950s isn't empty, it's full of quiet resilience, unspoken fears, tiny joys, and the stubborn hope that tomorrow will be better. It's the hour when people loosen their masks, when houses stop performing, when dreams sneak in through the cracks left by daily life. It's the moment the suburbs stop pretending and simply... You climb into the family sedan, a gleaming chrome battleship weighing roughly the same as a small moon. The seats are slippery vinyl, the dashboard is metal, and absolutely no one has ever heard of a seatbelt. Dad turns the key, the engine roars like a mildly offended dragon, and off you go, hurtling through the suburbs at a speed that now feels spiritually reckless. The car vibrates with the raw confidence of a machine designed before engineering departments discovered restraint. Chrome gleams on every surface, reflecting sunlight directly into your retinas. The steering wheel is the diameter of a pizza and requires the upper body strength of a lumberjack to turn. The interior smells faintly of gasoline, warm vinyl, and hope. You slide along the back seat like a puck on an air hockey table, with every gentle curve in the road. Your only anchor is the thin armrest that folds down unpredictably, offering emotional support but absolutely zero physical stability. Children of this era have learned to develop innate balancing abilities, gripping door handles, siblings, or the power of prayer to stay upright. Dad drives with one hand on the wheel, elbow out the window, hair blowing back in the wind like a man starring in his own personal car commercial. He taps the dashboard lovingly. This is his pride, his joy, his metal companion in the war against rush hour. Every rattle, sputter, or concerning noise is dismissed with, "She'll be fine," a phrase that has soothed exactly 0 passengers. Mum sits beside him, politely pretending not to notice that Dad's merging technique is less merge safely and more assert dominance. She offers helpful comments like, "Watch the curb and maybe slow down and please don't attempt to pass them on a hill." Dad nods sympathetically and proceeds to do whatever he was already doing. You glance around at the dashboard, a glittering panel of knobs and switches, none of which have labels that correspond to their actual function. One dial controls the radio sometimes, the heater other times, and static all the time. The glove compartment rattles ominously, containing mystery tools and paperwork from 1948. The windows crank down manually, allowing a rush of wind that instantly destroys your hair and steals every loose paper in the vehicle. You watch those papers swirl into the suburban ether, becoming someone else's problem. Mum sighs softly. Dad pretends he didn't notice. Outside, the world speeds by in long, colourful streaks. Houses blur together in perfect pastel uniformity. Lawns flash in hypnotic green. Other cars glide past in an elegant ballet of steel and questionable safety. Each one looks like a ship prepared for transatlantic travel, piloted by drivers who firmly believe they are invincible. At intersections, Dad performs rolling stops while making deeply meaningful eye contact with crossing guards. Children scatter. Birds take flight. Mum holds onto the dashboard with both hands. You, accustomed to danger, continue sliding from one side of the seat to the other like an animated sack of potatoes. A trip to the store becomes an event. A drive to school becomes a rite of passage. A journey across town becomes an odyssey requiring snacks, bathroom reminders, and internal prayers. The car jukes and jolts across uneven pavement, absorbing bumps with the grace of a brick rolling downhill. When Dad needs to brake suddenly, the laws of physics remind you that human bodies were not meant to be projectiles. You go flying forward, caught only by Mum's outstretched arm, a manoeuvre known universally among mid-century mothers as the protective bar. It is the unofficial seatbelt of the 1950s, deployed automatically, swiftly, and with surprising strength. The radio crackles to life, playing cheerful music with just enough static to sound haunted. Dad hums along. Mum glances nervously at the speedometer, which may or may not be accurate. You lean back. Well, slide back, taking in the warm vinyl smell and the thunderous engine beneath you. Despite its flaws, the car feels alive. It carries not just people, but the moods, dreams, and anxieties of an entire family. It has seen grocery trips, school drop-offs, late-night drives to calm crying babies, and vacations that tested everyone's patience. It is both a transport machine and a time capsule of domestic life. Eventually you arrive at your destination. Dad shifts into park with great ceremony, the engine groaning before settling into a smoky silence. Everyone exits the car slightly sweaty, slightly wind-blown, and slightly surprised to still be alive. Dad pats the hood affectionately. Mum exhales as though releasing 2 years of tension. You climb out, legs shaky, heart pounding, realizing you have survived another suburban voyage. And it dawns on you. The family car isn't just transportation, it's a metallic metaphor for the 1950s itself. Big, shiny, overconfident, under-regulated, and somehow carrying everyone forward through pure optimism, stubbornness, and the blessed strength of Mum's outstretched arm. At school, the teacher orders everyone to duck and cover, as if hiding under a wooden desk could protect you from the harsh glow of mutually assured destruction. You curl into a ball, staring at your trembling shoelaces, thinking about how weird it is that recess and world-ending firestorms are both part of today's schedule. The teacher moves slowly down the aisle, her sensible heels clicking against the floor with the confidence of someone who has absolutely no idea what she would do in an actual emergency. She smiles reassuringly as if to say, "Don't worry, children, we've mastered this. We have desks." The desks, of course, are ancient wooden relics with gum stuck underneath and motivational carvings like "Tom was here." But today, they are sacred shields, magical force fields, your one defense against the atomic era's most ominous party trick. Your classmates fold themselves into trembling shapes, knees drawn to chests, backs curved like anxious turtles. Some peek through their arms, some take it seriously, some whisper nervously. One kid, always that kid, snores instantly. You tighten your grip on your shoelaces, even though you're not sure why. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's prayer. The lights dim slightly, just because the school's wiring is unreliable, and a few kids gasp dramatically. The teacher reassures everyone with a voice 1 octave higher than usual, which is absolutely the universal sign for I am lying through my teeth right now. Remember, she says, if anything happens, just duck and cover. Yes, because the world's most powerful weapons will be utterly foiled by small children crouching under furniture. You look around the dim classroom. Sunlight flickers across the chipped paint. The chalkboard still reads Long Division Test Friday, which feels deeply rude at a time like this. A poster on the wall features a cartoon turtle wearing a jaunty helmet, demonstrating proper nuclear safety form. His name is Bert. You hate him. Bert has never felt fear. The drill continues. Your knees ache. The floor smells like pencil shavings, chalk dust, and the faint lingering scent of yesterday's spilled milk. You become hyper-aware of tiny things. The squeak of a desk leg against the linoleum, someone's shallow breathing, the scratchy feel of your sweater sleeve against your cheek. Somewhere outside, a car backfires. Half the class screams. The teacher insists again that everything is fine. Eventually she gives the all clear, and everyone unfurls from their protective crouches like confused newborn deer. Knees crack, backs pop. A few kids shake out their limbs dramatically as if they survived actual combat. The collective relief spreads through the room in a wave, followed immediately by the realization that math class is now resuming. You return to your seat, brain buzzing. It's hard to transition emotionally from imminent cosmic annihilation to multiplying fractions. But the 1950s require this kind of emotional flexibility. The curriculum allows no time for existential spirals. The teacher cheerfully picks up her chalk, leaving faint white smears on her skirt. All right, class, let's get back to work. Someone groans. Someone drops a pencil. Someone mutters, I think my soul left my body. And yet life continues. Outside the window, the American flag flutters calmly in the breeze. A dog trots along the sidewalk, unconcerned with geopolitics. The sun shines on the neat little rows of houses, as if promising everyone that the world is stable, predictable, and safe, even when it absolutely isn't. You watch dust motes swirl in the sunlight and feel something strange settle inside you. A child's version of resilience. A quiet understanding that even in absurd circumstances, even when the adults don't have answers, you will still finish your spelling worksheet, still go to recess, still eat a squished sandwich at lunch, still laugh when your best friend makes faces during science. Because fear may drift into the classroom like chalk dust, but childhood pushes right back. By the time the final bell rings, the nuclear drill is already fading into memory, stored somewhere between times tables, and Billy fell off the monkey bars again. You hop onto your bike and pedal home fast, letting the wind erase the morning's worries from your mind. And you realise, duck and cover isn't really about safety. It's about giving kids something to do when adults have no real solutions. A ritual of reassurance wrapped in linoleum floors and wooden desks, a reminder that life goes on even in the shadow of impossible things. So tonight, as we leave behind the lawns trimmed within an inch of their lives, the casserole suspended in culinary uncertainty, and the chrome appliances humming like anxious metal guardians, take a slow breath. You've just survived an entire day in the 1950s American suburbs, a world polished on the outside but quietly chaotic underneath, where every smile hid a worry, and every home hid at least one ashtray shaped like a seashell. You lived through the breakfast cigarette haze, the unspoken neighbourhood competitions, the unchecked childhood freedom, and the deeply emotional event of Dad removing his tie. You watched your mother juggle a full-time domestic career without ever receiving the applause she deserved. And you, somehow, made it through dinner without questioning why anyone believed tuna should mingle with crushed potato chips. The era was charming, strange, hopeful, exhausting, a place where everyone pretended to have all the answers while secretly flipping through the instruction manual of life. But beneath the pastel paint and the perfectly trimmed hedges, there was something remarkable. Resilience. Families held themselves together with little more than routine, optimism, and a nightly prayer that the washing machine wouldn't explode. People did their best with what they had, which most days wasn't much more than determination, a handshake, and a recipe card full of ingredients banned today by 3 federal agencies. Yet despite everything, they laughed. They dreamed. They believed tomorrow could be brighter, cleaner, smoother, easier, even if it meant mowing the lawn one more time. Their world wasn't perfect, but it was stitched together by intention, effort, and a stubborn hope that things were getting better. So as you settle deeper into your comfortable bed, with modern temperature control, memory foam, and the blessed knowledge that nobody expects you to iron your curtains, maybe whisper a quiet thank you. Thank the folks who navigated an era of pressure and perfection and still carved out joy. Thank the people who built neighborhoods, raised families, and created little pockets of stability in a world wobbling on the edge of the atomic age. Because history, whether loud or pastel, reminds us that people keep going. They adapt, they improvise, they find ways to laugh even when life is strange enough to put olives in jello. And you, wrapped in the softness of the present, get to rest knowing you come from a long line of humans who made it through far tougher nights, so let your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift, like a station wagon coasting down a quiet cul-de-sac at dusk. And let sleep take over gently, like the glow of a black and white TV fading into a soft, reassuring hum. Good night, and sweet dreams.